What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to The Haunted Beard. Once again, my name is Jake. Well, I am back today with another Saw review. In case you haven't been following along, I've been going through one by one and reviewing the entire Saw franchise, and today, talking about Saw 5. This franchise just kept making money, and so they had to come up with crazier and crazier ways to continue this storyline. So, Saw 5, here it is. Let's get into it. So Saw 5 picks up immediately after Saw 4 following Jigsaw's grisly demise, and Detective Mark Hoffman is commended as a hero, but Agent Stram, aka Agent Mean Mug, is suspicious and delves into Hoffman's past. Meanwhile, another group of people are put through a series of gruesome tests set up by Jigsaw. Now, in case you haven't watched any of my other Saw reviews, I am really kind of totally discounting any of the logical and plot holes and all the inconsistencies with the storylines in these movies, because I could be here all day picking apart these things, and I'm just not going to get bogged down by going through all that. So with that being said, I actually quite enjoy the first few opening scenes in Saw 5. I think the opening scene itself is actually pretty good, as you get a cool trap/kill scene. The guy strapped down to the table, and the trap here is pretty sweet because it's like a nod to the famous Edgar Allan Poe story, The Pit and the Pendulum, right? Where you've got this gigantic blade swinging back and forth that gradually lowers down until it cuts the guy right in half. And so I just like that there. I like the callback to Edgar Allan Poe. It's just kind of an inventive, creative kill. It gets the blood flowing, which, of course, what else can you expect with a Saw movie? So I like the opening kill, and the opening trap. It works pretty well. I also like the following scene where Agent Stram gets trapped in the warehouse. Right after the events of Part 4, he gets knocked unconscious and then comes to with his head in a plexiglass box that fills up with water. And he's going to drown, but he is able to puncture his own trachea with a pen in order to survive. And as much of a hard time as I gave this guy calling him Agent Mean Mug in my Saw 4 review, I got to give this guy some respect here. When you're that hardcore to be able to puncture your own neck with a pen in order to survive, you have earned my respect. And I actually kind of like and think that the setup for Saw 5 is actually pretty good and kind of intriguing, at least. I like that they bring back the sort of escape room feel where you've got these 5 strangers trapped in this room who don't know each other but have to sort of figure out what the connection is between them, all the while they're trying to survive all these traps. And I feel like the Saw movies kind of got away from that sort of aspect and that sort of setup in Part 4 and Part 3, and I'm kind of glad that they were able to kind of bring that back just because I like that whole escape room type vibe that these movies do. So I like that setup. And then also, too, part of the setup is there's a scene pretty early on in the movie where Jill gets brought into the lawyer's office and finds out that Jigsaw has left her this mysterious box. And so you're kind of intrigued there and curious as to how that's going to kind of factor into the whole thing. Unfortunately, though, that kind of brings me to one of my major issues with this movie. And one of my major issues is that I feel like at this point in the franchise, like the writers aren't even really concerned with telling a complete story. Like there are things that are set up here that they don't even care about answering or giving you information to. They're just like, we'll just worry about that in the next one, right? Now, I guess I should have double checked. I have no idea whether or not Saw 6 was already greenlit by the time this one came out. If I had to put money on it, I would bet that it was. And so it's like, we don't really need to tell a complete story. We'll just kind of set some stuff up here and then, just figure it out when Saw 6 comes out. And it's just kind of lazy to me, and I don't like that you don't find out anything about that mysterious box that Jill gets, and once you finally figure out the connection between all the strangers in the room, it doesn't really get you anywhere. It doesn't really add up to anything. It doesn't really serve any larger purpose within at least this story, and so it's just kind of frustrating because you can just kind of see the laziness, I guess, really, in terms of the writing here really kind of take over, I think, with Saw 5 for sure. Now, what ends up happening is Agent Hoffman here gets exonerated as this hero because Jigsaw and Amanda are dead, and he gets all the credit for putting an end to this whole thing and saving the day and getting the girl out and everything like that. But of course, Agent Stram is onto him, and he's suspicious, and he is going to do everything within his power to bring Hoffman down because he knows that he is the next Jigsaw killer. And I know I said I was going to mostly kind of avoid and disregard sort of the plot issues and logical issues of these movies, but I can't help but just bring this up. So, after Stram survives his trap, remember, pen in the neck, and he gets out of there, why isn't he, like, shouting from the rooftops that somebody else put him in that trap? Because you gotta figure, Jigsaw and Amanda are dead at this point. And so if they're both dead, who put him in that trap? And it's like he doesn't say anything. And so everybody just thinks that everything's fine. But it's like, hey, dude, I have a hole in my neck here. Somebody did this to me. But like he doesn't say, I don't understand why this guy isn't screaming from the rooftops that, like, hey, there's somebody else out there. But anyways, I rest my case on that one. We'll continue right along. And so for the most part, what the movie does here is it kind of alternates between sort of three main storylines here as you're following Stram trying to track down Hoffman and find evidence to prove that he's the killer. You're also following the five strangers in the escape room type setup as they're going through the traps trying to survive. And then you get a handful of more flashbacks and backstory filling as we now kind of get the backstory of Hoffman's initial interaction and meeting with Jigsaw and how their relationship came to be and how he sort of factors into this whole thing. And it's at this point in the movie we're introduced to a new character, Agent Erickson, who is Agent Stram's boss. And this guy, I'm going to just call him Bluetooth from here on out throughout the rest of this review because that is the most interesting aspect to his character. That Bluetooth that is in his ear in every scene that he is in this movie. It's hilarious. Like, I don't know how you're supposed to take this guy seriously. Like, I mean, he might as well be wearing, like, this gigantic red clown nose. And it's just like, is anybody else seeing this? It just looks so ridiculous. And I get a kick out of it every single time he's in the movie. And so Bluetooth tells Agent Stram that he's off the case because he needs to get away from it and get some separation and some time off. But of course, Stram can't do that. And he does some real quick, crafty Google searching, more or less, where he finds out about this guy named Seth Baxter, who killed this woman, and the woman happened to be Detective Hoffman's sister. And Seth Baxter turns out to be the guy who was cut in half in the opening scene of the movie. And the movie just kind of plays this off like it's this deep, dark secret that nobody knows about, nobody's been able to put together. But it's like, this is on, like, official police record, and, like, would nobody think to, like, at least question Hoffman? Like, he would clearly have a motive to kill this guy because he killed his sister, but nobody's put this all together and nobody's decided to do that. So, I don't know. I mean, it's not exactly top-notch detective work here, but, you know, what do you expect? Now, for the five strangers who are in the escape room type scenario, I do like a couple of the traps okay. The opening trap where the chick gets decapitated is kind of cool. All of these rooms, they're having to kind of solve these puzzles within a certain amount of time. Otherwise, these bombs are going to go off and blow everybody up. And so you kind of have, you know, you got to figure out these traps and also get this sort of race against the clock type scenario while also they're trying to figure out what their connection is. And so for the most part, this aspect of the movie works well enough for me. And I do think the traps are pretty decent. I think the highlight is obviously the last one when you've got the two final people left and they've got to literally saw through their own arms to fill up this jar of blood. Well, they spill enough blood, right, to kind of make amends for all the bad things that they've done. So that whole side of the movie, that whole storyline of the movie, it works well enough. Now, in terms of Hoffman, what we find out is that some of the kills early on in the movie are just imitation kills. And so he's been imitating Jigsaw because he's not setting the traps up to actually be winnable, because he's really just out for revenge. And Jigsaw doesn't like that because he doesn't like, him getting credit for his stuff because he sees himself as different from Hoffman, so he finally tracks him down, and we finally get Jigsaw. This scene doesn't occur till about 45 minutes into the movie. And then you just get kind of a handful of sort of flashback sequences here. And it's unfortunate, though, because I think the brighter aspect of these films is the character of Jigsaw and is the performance by Tobin Bell. And because of how they kind of set up the first two movies with him then having, dying, they're having to find creative ways to bring back their sort of bread and butter into this franchise. And it's all being done with these flashback scenes, and it's just sort of giving us story that we don't need. It's giving us information that we don't really need. And it's just unfortunate because it really kind of wastes the sort of pride and joy crowning achievement of the Saw movies, which is Jigsaw himself. And then you kind of see him used in this way, and it's just sort of a bummer. And I think Detective Hoffman's character is just not very great. And unfortunately, I don't think the performance is really that good. There's just nothing to his character. He's just so blah, and the performance just doesn't sell it. And it's just like, again, when you have something as good as Tobin Bell as Jigsaw, and it's just like, this is the next guy. He's the one who's going to carry. It's just like, man, it's just like, you got to give me something better than this. It's just another disappointing aspect to this thing. And through these flashbacks, we find out that Hoffman has been with Jigsaw since the events of the first Saw movie, and then that Jigsaw actually gives Hoffman a game of his own at the end of Saw 3, which is, his game happens to involve the 5 people that are in the escape room type scenario right now. And so all this culminates into what I think is a pretty unsatisfying conclusion. In terms of the people in the escape room, the 5 strangers, like I said, the traps there I like well enough, and it's a decent enough aspect of this movie, but it culminates to where you find out that they all had some sort of involvement in this massive warehouse fire that ends up killing like 8 people, only none of that really plays into the film in any sort of meaningful way. And this is where I kind of get back to my main complaint, is like there's just a lot of unanswered questions here that they didn't really bother sort of answering. They're just like, we'll figure that out later sort of thing. And the sort of twist ending, if you will, I think is pretty disappointing and actually pretty predictable, as it's pretty easy to kind of see that this is the direction the movie is heading towards in the finale, as Hoffman really kind of manipulates everything. There's finally a confrontation between him and Stram where he pulls the switcheroo out of the plexiglass box, and he gets everything sort of twisted to have Stram take the fall for being the Jigsaw killer, and Hoffman gets off scot-free. And it's just kind of like, okay. It's just overall pretty underwhelming in terms of what we kind of expect with Saw, because, like, again, all these movies are varying degrees of ridiculous, and so you kind of want them to kind of hit those crazy, absurd levels in terms of the twist ending, but this one here is just kind of lackluster. So that's where Saw 5 concludes and sets things up for Saw 6. So overall, there are a few aspects of this movie that I enjoy and think are, decent enough, but the majority of it is just not very great. I don't like that from a writing perspective, that they're not really even concerned with telling a complete story anymore. That's just lazy to me. A handful of the performances are just not great. I'm not a big fan of Hoffman's character, really. And I just don't like how there's just so much flashback giving us information that we don't care about and don't need, and that Jigsaw is just wasted because that's the only way they use him in this movie. So all in all, for Saw 5, probably going to be, maybe a 4.5 out of 10 for this one. So this thing's not a complete pile. It is watchable, and I can have a decent enough time with it. But those are just my thoughts. Hit me up down in the comments, though. Let me know if you like this movie or hate it, and what you like or hate about it. Would love to hear from you. So those are my thoughts. Obviously, up next will be Saw 6. Thank you so much for watching. If you like videos like this, that is all I do in The Haunted Beard. It is all horror and thriller movie content coming at you. Hit that subscribe button. I greatly appreciate it. I'll see you next time on The Haunted Beard.